to try to have some clarity of a roadmap that we can then evaluate against is very important. And he's in a difficult position, just like others in government before him have been in a difficult position, where, for example, when you're asked at a congressional hearing, and he's not subject to Senate confirmation, much to the chagrin of a number of people in Congress, because he's a presidential appointee who is not confirmed by the Senate, so he doesn't testify because of executive privilege. When you are testifying and somebody asks you the question, as I was asked a couple of times, for example, is the nation's budget for cybersecurity adequate? And I was asked by the chairman of another committee, is the nation's budget for cyber R&D adequate? Well, unfortunately, what I don't think even some people on the Hill appreciate, but perhaps others don't appreciate as well, is that there is only one answer that a person who's a public official can give to that question. And I answered it a variation of, and of course they didn't listen to my answer, but I answered that the money we have for the particular fiscal year in question is adequate to do what we plan to do during that fiscal year. And so the opportunity for something like the after action from Cyberstorm that creates a roadmap informed by government and the private sector of these are the major things we need to do, because that's not just, a public official can't say, I need all those things, because he or she has to go through the agency process. DHS, you have to go through the agency process of DHS against all the competing considerations, not just in Homeland Security, but everything else at DHS, of which there's a lot. And then you got to go to the OMB process, then you go to the Hill. So you don't have the advocacy for the broader picture of a major leader. And, you know, the White House official can't do it either. Well, I think public officials can do it, but generally they can only do it once, because they won't have the chance to do it a second time. So it becomes incumbent on the private sector to try to create a framework and to create visibility about what's necessary, so that we can fundamentally say to the people who make the decisions what we need to worry about and what we need to do about it. And I think it's the same in terms of our national picture, and it's the same within our organizations. We need to make it easy for folks to know what we need to worry about and what we need to do about it. The final vignette I wanted to give you before I go through a few slides, and I don't see microphones, but I assume we'll have microphones because I'd really like to have questions you know, and comments as we go along. Well, I'll get to that. I'll get to that in a minute. Some of the points that I wanted to touch on. Cyber is the ability to operate in cyberspace to achieve your results and not those of your adversaries. For me, having experience is only valuable if we learn from it. And I know in my personal life sometimes that's difficult, and it's frustrating, and I have a daughter who's almost 16, and I'm trying to teach her how to drive now, and you realize that things that are instinctual to you are not instinctual to them. And so that when you have the sense that, you know, we're going downhill, and even though I know you're not pressing on the accelerator, we're going faster and faster, you know, and that stop sign's coming awfully quickly. Or things like, well, if I would keep the receipts for my taxes and put them in the folder right away, then when comes April, not January or February perhaps like some of you, but it comes April and you got to do your taxes, this stuff's right there. And if you make estimated payments like I did, you got to not only pay them, it's great when you do, but you got to write it down and you got to put it someplace you can find it. And you learn, I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to learn some of those lessons over and over again. Information sharing is very important. It's one of the tactical things we have to do. But if I'm in one more of those public-private partnership meetings in Washington where people say, we need more information sharing, why don't we have more information sharing? Let's have more information sharing. It just makes you want to scream. You know, that's fine, but we got to go farther than that. We got to set requirements. What's the information we need and from whom? Because a meeting where you're in the, and we love good meetings in Washington, perhaps folks do here and everywhere, and we want to get through the agenda and we want to be able to say we had a good meeting and we want to have a lot of activities. But if we don't know where we're going, as they say, any place will do. I fundamentally believe we need a strategic approach to the cyber challenge. We talk about people, processes, and technology. We need the same approach for the major issues that face our nation and face the global information infrastructure. And I believe a strategic approach is fundamental for our country, and it's fundamental for each one of our organizations. And I'll respectfully suggest a couple ways to consider doing that. I think stakeholder collaboration is critical at each level, and whether it's the nation or the organization, I think it's fundamentally important. I spent some time with the Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon, and they led, what I thought was a very exciting effort called the Resiliency Engineering Framework. And their concept was that you needed key folks who understand the organization, need to be part of not just a one-time thing, but a dynamic engagement to achieve purposes in the long run. And so they were focusing on business continuity, disaster recovery, security, and IT operations. So they wanted people fundamentally whose focus was what I think is the focus for our country in some sense, and our organizations in a real sense, to achieve our mission, to advance our objectives. That's what IT is about. But that you need those key stakeholders to be engaged in an ongoing basis to also do what I think are two other critical things for organizations and our nation. One is risk management, and the other is saving money. Because increasingly, our organizations, we have the battle of dollars. Now that I'm in a publicly traded corporation, you see it firsthand. It's quite real, where overhead is almost an epithet in a way. But the stakeholder collaboration, to have that visibility, and so at the organizational level or the national level, those key folks need to be thinking, oh, let's do cybersecurity. They need to be thinking about, how do we advance the mission of our organization? How do we advance IT operations to make it more efficient in advancing mission? How do we make sure business continuity and disaster recovery are part of our ingrained processes and understanding of what is critical? What does that depend on, and how do we achieve that? Threat information is important, but risk should be the driver. One of the lessons that I hoped we learned, but I guess we probably have to learn it again, is that we want to try to have a risk-focused approach rather than threat. In other words, we don't just wait till we know that somebody is thinking about flying planes into buildings. We have to have an approach that's essentially saying, okay, what do we need to worry about and what do we need to do about it? And it can't just be the bosses. It's got to be representatives of the everyday parts of the organization and of our country who can provide that information, and then you have visibility on the beauties of a risk management program where you can have, acceptance, transference, and so forth of the risk, and then you can document it. Because I think I spoke to the CISO of a major telecom, and I was very disheartened as he was talking about Starbucks. I just like the taste. I don't need the caffeine. He was talking about, look, if there's 65,000 bots attacking our network, we're in deep trouble. And frankly, that was a lower number than I thought would be of great concern to him. Some of the other carriers don't believe it. They say it's not a problem. And he said to me that he believed, much like my former boss, Richard Clark, that we really need a major cyber event before folks are going to take things seriously. And I found that just incredibly disheartening. And I know he's not going to give up on it. And he had just had dinner with Keith Alexander and Howard Schmidt and some of the major military folks. So he's not giving up. But it's like, first of all, I don't see why, even if there is another major cyber disaster, we think that people are then going to take it seriously. But I believe there is one thing that does happen if there's a major problem, such as if there's a major cyber event. And I think in this country that is absolutely clear, and that is that somebody will get blamed. And I think what we have not done is we have not adequately, and I obviously put myself in that as well, we have not adequately made clear to the decision makers, this is what you need to worry about, and this is what you need to do about it, so that two things are possible. One is that they start to think, well, if something goes wrong, I'm going to get blamed. And the second, the other side of the coin, is that we need to make it easier for folks to do the right thing. I heard a panel yesterday of 3 staff members of some Senate committees that are studying the various kinds of legislation.